"Excuse me, sir. When you're finished, could we have what's left on your plate?" A mother, two starving children, 8 miles, walked through the desert after her car mysteriously died. She didn't know the stranger she was begging was Keanu Reeves. She didn't know her husband had sabotaged her car and was tracking her every move. And she definitely didn't know that this one moment of desperation would expose a monster hiding behind $1 million smile. But when his first wife, the one everyone thought was dead, walked into that courtroom 8 years later, everything changed. What happened next? No one satisfies how this story will end. The desert wind carried the scent of sagebrush and dust through the cracked parking lot of a small roadside diner in rural New Mexico. It was one of those places that time seemed to have forgotten, nestled between miles of empty highway and endless stretches of sun-scorched earth. The kind of place where locals came for coffee and conversation, where strangers rarely stopped unless their cars gave out or their stomachs couldn't wait another mile. On this particular afternoon, a woman pushed open the diner's glass door with trembling hands. Her name was Elaine Thornton, 29 years old, though the exhaustion etched into her face made her look much older. Clinging to her legs were two small children, a boy and a girl, twins who had just turned 4. Their names were Caleb and Rosie, and their faces were streaked with dust from the road, their lips cracked from thirst. Elaine had not eaten in 3 days. The twins had shared half a stale muffin from a gas station the morning before, while Elaine pretended she wasn't hungry. Their car, a 2005 Honda Civic, had died 8 miles back. So she had walked, carrying one child, and then the other when their little legs gave out. 8 miles through the punishing New Mexico sun, with blisters forming on her feet and sunburn spreading across her shoulders. She had counted the change in her pocket 3 times before entering. $2.47. Not enough for a meal, not enough for a glass of milk, not enough for anything. The diner was small and worn, with vinyl booths and a counter where a few locals sat nursing cups of coffee. Behind the counter stood a woman in her 50s named Wanda, who looked up when the door opened, her expression softening when she saw the state of the woman and children who had just walked in. But it was the man in the corner booth who caught Elaine's attention. He sat alone, eating a late breakfast with the unhurried ease of someone who had nowhere particular to be. He wore a simple black T-shirt, faded jeans, and old leather boots. His beard was longer than most men wore it, and a baseball cap sat on the table beside him. He was reading a book while he ate, completely absorbed in his own world. Nothing about him suggested wealth or status. Through the window, Elaine could see a black Harley Davidson parked in the shade, and she assumed it belonged to him. What she did not know was that this man was Keanu Reeves, and what she definitely did not know was that this chance encounter would change the course of her life forever. Keanu was on his way to visit the Haven Foundation, a nonprofit organization he had founded several years earlier with a veteran friend named Marcus Webb. The foundation helped people who had fallen through the cracks of society. This diner was a regular stop for him, and Wanda knew who he was but respected his privacy. Elaine stood near the entrance, her eyes scanning the menu board. The prices blurred as her mind did the math. $2.47. A cup of coffee was $1.50. The cheapest item, a single piece of toast, was $1.75. She could not afford even toast for her children. Her eyes drifted to the man in the corner, to the plate in front of him piled high with bacon, eggs, hash browns, and toast. There was still plenty left. Before she could talk herself out of it, she walked toward his table. The man looked up as she approached. He set down his fork and gave her his full attention, as though she were the only person in the room. Elaine's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Excuse me, sir. I am so sorry to bother you. But when you are finished, could we have what is left on your plate?" The diner went silent. Wanda froze behind the counter, a middle, Aged couple in a nearby booth turned to stare, their expressions ranging from pity to disgust. The man did not move at first. He just looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the sunburned shoulders, the blistered feet, the protective way she held her children. His gaze held no judgment, no pity, something else entirely. Then he spoke, his voice low and kind. "How long since they ate?" Elaine's throat closed up. She could not answer. "Mama?" Caleb tugged at her shirt, his small voice weak. "My tummy hurts." Something shifted in the man's expression. He raised his hand, and Elaine flinched instinctively, an old reflex. But he was only signaling to the waitress. "Wanda," he called. "3 full meals, same as what I am having, and please make it quick. These children need to eat now." Wanda hesitated. "Keanu, honey, I have to charge for..." "Triple it if you need to. Just get the food out here." Wanda nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. Elaine stood frozen. This stranger was ordering full meals for her and her children as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Sit down," he said gently, gesturing to the booth across from him. "Please." Every instinct screamed at her to run. Men who seemed kind always had an angle. Her husband had taught her that lesson many times over. But Rosie's small hand squeezed hers, and Caleb whimpered again, and Elaine's desperate need to feed her children overrode her fear. She sat. The man pushed his own plate across the table. "Start with this. More is coming? We cannot? You can, and you will." His voice was firm but gentle. He broke off a piece of toast and handed it to Caleb, who looked at Elaine for permission. She nodded, and the boy snatched it, cramming it into his mouth as if someone might take it away. Rosie followed suit. Elaine watched them through burning eyes but refused to let the tears fall. "Thank you," she managed. "You do not have to do this." "Yeah, I do." The man leaned back. "I have kids too. Twin girls. They are 14 now, live with their mother in California." Elaine looked up, surprised. "A motorcycle rider with children. How old are yours?" he asked. 4. They turned 4 in February. Good age. A sad smile crossed his face. "Enjoy it while it lasts." Wanda arrived with plates piled high with pancakes, eggs, bacon, and fruit. The smell made Elaine's stomach cramp painfully. "Eat," the man said. "You cannot take care of them if you are running on empty." Elaine's body betrayed her pride. She picked up a fork and ate, forcing herself to go slowly so she wouldn't get sick. It was then that a voice cut through the moment, sharp and dripping with contempt. "You really should not encourage these people." A man at a nearby table, perhaps 50, wearing an expensive shirt and a gold watch, was looking at Elaine with undisguised disgust. "Give them something once, and they will keep coming back," he continued loudly. "That is why people like this never learn to stand on their own feet, always looking for a handout." Elaine wanted to disappear. This was her greatest fear, being seen as a beggar, a burden. But the stranger across from her turned slowly to face the wealthy man, and when he spoke, his voice was calm but carried an edge like steel. "Do you know anything about her story? Do you know how far she has walked to get here? Do you know what she has been through?" The wealthy man's face reddened. "I know. I worked for everything I have." "And I suppose nobody ever gave you a chance, a job, an opportunity." The stranger's eyebrows rose. "Let me tell you something. Kindness does not cost anything, and wealth does not give you the right to judge another human being." He turned back to Elaine. "Now, if you will excuse us, these children are eating." The wealthy man sputtered, threw some bills on his table, and stormed out. Silence returned, but warmer now. Wanda caught Elaine's eye and gave her a small nod. Rosie had slowed her eating and was looking at the stranger curiously. "What is your name?" she asked. "Keanu." "What is yours?" "Rosie. And this is Caleb. He does not talk much to strangers." "That is smart. You should be careful around people you do not know." Keanu smiled. "But sometimes strangers turn out to be friends you have not met yet." Rosie held up her worn stuffed bunny. "Mr. Flopsy says you are nice." "Well, Mr. Flopsy looks like an excellent judge of character." Keanu took the bunny gently, examining it with exaggerated seriousness. "What do you think, Mr. Flopsy? Can we trust this guy?" He held the bunny to his ear as if listening, and Rosie giggled, a sound of pure joy that Elaine had not heard from her daughter in weeks. "Mr. Flopsy says yes," Keanu declared, handing the bunny back. After the children had slowed down, Keanu spoke again. "Where are you headed?" Elaine stiffened. "Santa Fe. My sister lives there." His expression told her he knew she was lying, but he did not push. "That is about 70 miles northeast. How are you planning to get there?" "We will figure something out." "With no car and no money." When Elaine did not answer, he continued. "I saw you walking in from the highway. Saw the blisters on your feet. Saw how you counted out change before coming inside, then put it back." Elaine's face flushed with shame. "I am not trying to embarrass you," he said quietly. "I am trying to understand what kind of help you need." "I do not need help," she said automatically, then felt foolish. She was eating food he had bought. "Okay, then let me rephrase. I am offering help. Whether you take it is your call." He pulled out his phone and showed her a website. "This is the Haven Foundation, a place I helped start with a friend. We help people going through hard times. It is about 20 miles from here. No cost, no strings. You and the children can stay while we figure out your car situation." Elaine studied the website, photos of modest buildings, a garden, a playground. It looked safe. "What do you want from me?" The question came out harsh. Keanu did not flinch. "Nothing. But I know that look in your eyes. Someone has you running scared, and you are so used to being hurt that kindness feels like a trap." Elaine's breath caught. How could he see through her so easily? "I help people," he continued. "Not because I expect anything back, but because I have been in dark places myself. And when I was at my lowest, people helped me even when I did not deserve it." Elaine thought about the alternative, walking back to the highway with two exhausted children. Hitchhiking with no protection. "Okay," she whispered, "but just until the car is fixed. Just until the car is fixed." They finished eating, and Keanu paid the bill, leaving Wanda a generous tip. Outside, he led them to a modest SUV parked behind the diner. "I bring this when I need to haul supplies," he explained. "The bike will get picked up later." As Elaine helped the children into the back seat, the diner door opened. The wealthy man from earlier stepped out, blocking their path. "You are Keanu Reeves, aren't you?" He wore a smug expression. "I thought I recognized you. The movie star?" Keanu's expression remained neutral. "That is right." The man laughed coldly. "Never thought a Hollywood celebrity would waste time picking up strays. What is this, a publicity stunt?" Keanu was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but every word carried weight. "In the hardest years of my life, when I lost the people I loved most, nobody asked if I needed help. They saw the famous actor, not the person who was drowning." He paused. "I promised myself I would never do that to someone else." He opened the car door for Elaine. "And one more thing. This woman is not a stray. She is a mother who walked 8 miles through the desert to keep her children safe. That is braver than anything I have ever done." The wealthy man stood speechless as the SUV pulled away. Inside the car, Rosie and Caleb were already drowsing in the back seat, exhaustion finally catching up now that their bellies were full. Keanu drove in comfortable silence. The desert rolled by outside, vast and empty and somehow beautiful. After a few miles, Elaine spoke quietly. "His name is Preston. My husband." She swallowed. "He hurt my son. I had to leave." Keanu did not push for more. He simply nodded. "You do not have to explain anything right now," he said. "There will be time for that later, if you want. Right now, the only thing that matters is getting you somewhere safe." Elaine looked back at her children sleeping peacefully. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something other than fear. It was small and fragile, barely a flicker, but it felt like the beginning of hope. The SUV turned onto a dirt road marked by a simple wooden sign that read the Haven Foundation. Beyond it, a cluster of buildings shimmered in the afternoon heat. Elaine did not know what waited for her there. She did not know if she could trust these strangers or if this was all too good to be true. But she knew one thing for certain. She was done running alone. After 25 minutes of driving through winding dirt roads and rolling hills dotted with desert brush, the SUV came to a stop in front of a wooden gate. Beyond it, Elaine could see a cluster of buildings arranged around a central courtyard. Nothing like she had expected. She had prepared herself for something rough. A few trailers maybe, some broken-down vehicles. The kind of place where desperate people ended up when they had nowhere else to go. What she saw instead made her breath catch in her throat. The Haven Foundation spread across perhaps 10 acres of land, enclosed by a sturdy wooden fence that looked well maintained. Inside, there were about a dozen small houses, single-story buildings painted in warm earth tones, arranged in a loose semicircle around a central courtyard. An American flag flew from a tall pole in the middle, snapping crisply in the desert breeze. To the east, a large vegetable garden flourished with rows of tomatoes, peppers, and squash. To the west, a children's playground stood with swings and a slide, where 2 kids were already playing. It was not fancy, it was not luxurious, but it was clean and organized, and it radiated something Elaine had not felt in a very long time: safety. "Welcome to the Haven," Keanu said simply as he turned off the engine. A man emerged from the main building, a larger structure that appeared to serve as the community center. He was African-American, perhaps 40 years old, tall and lean, with a scar that ran from his forehead down across his right cheek. He walked with a slight limp, the kind that spoke of old injuries that had never fully healed. When he saw Keanu, his serious expression broke into a wide smile. "Keanu!" He approached the SUV as Keanu stepped out, and the 2 men embraced like brothers. "Didn't expect you until tomorrow. Change of plans." Keanu gestured toward the SUV. "Marcus, I want you to meet someone." Elaine had stepped out of the car and was helping the children down from the back seat. Rosie clutched Mr. Flopsy tightly, and Caleb stayed pressed against his mother's leg, eyeing the stranger with suspicion. Marcus Webb studied them for a moment, and Elaine saw his expression shift as he took in their condition. The dusty clothes, the sunburned skin, the way Elaine positioned herself between him and the children. He had seen this before. Many times. "I'm Marcus," he said, keeping his voice gentle and making no move to approach too quickly. "Welcome to the Haven. You folks look like you could use some rest." Elaine nodded, not trusting her voice. Keanu explained briefly how they had met, leaving out most of the details and letting Elaine keep her privacy. Marcus listened without interrupting, then crouched down to the children's level. "Hey there," he said to Rosie and Caleb. "You 2 like dogs. We have 3 of them here and they love playing with kids." Rosie's eyes widened. "Real dogs. Real dogs. Big fluffy ones. You can meet them after you get settled in, if your mama says it's okay." For the first time since they had arrived, Caleb spoke. "Mama, can we see the dogs?" Elaine looked at Marcus, searching for any sign of threat, any hint of hidden motives. She found nothing but patience and understanding. "Maybe later," she said. "Let's get settled first." As they walked toward the main building, Elaine noticed other residents going about their day. A grizzled man with a white beard, perhaps close to 70, was repairing a section of fence near the garden. He wore a faded cap with military insignia, and his arms were covered in old tattoos that had blurred with age. "That's Dutch," Marcus said, following her gaze. "Vietnam veteran. He handles most of our security and maintenance. Don't let the grumpy exterior fool you. He's got a soft spot for kids." Dutch looked up as they passed, gave Elaine a brief nod, and returned to his work. Near the garage, a woman in her mid-30s was working on a motorcycle engine. She had short blonde hair and burned scars visible on her left arm, the kind that came from explosions rather than accidents. "And that's Greta," Marcus continued. "Army, served in Iraq. She teaches self-defense classes and helps with night security. If you ever feel unsafe, she's one of the first people you want to find. Greta looked up and offered a small wave before turning back to her work. Elaine took mental note of both. In her experience, knowing who the protectors were could mean the difference between life and death. A woman appeared from one of the nearby buildings. She was perhaps 45, with dark hair streaked with gray and pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her arms bore faded tattoos, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had seen combat and survived. Dolores Vega. She introduced herself, shaking Elaine's hand with a firm grip. Marine Corps, 3 deployments. Now I help run things around here. She smiled at the children. Come on, little ones. Let's get you somewhere comfortable. As Dolores led them toward a small cottage at the edge of the property. Elaine looked back over her shoulder. Keanu and Marcus had their heads together, speaking in low voices. She wondered what they were saying about her situation, about the danger she might be bringing to their doorstep. But she was too exhausted to worry about it now. One step at a time, that was all she could manage. The guest cottage was small but immaculate. 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living area with a worn but comfortable couch. Everything was clean, and as Dolores had promised, it was stocked with basic supplies. Bread, milk, eggs, fruit. Towels and soap in the bathroom. Fresh sheets on the beds. But it was the small details that made Elaine's throat tighten. Child-proof locks on the cabinets. A basket of toys in the corner of the living room. Children's toothbrushes still in their packages on the bathroom counter. A nightlight plugged into the outlet in each bedroom. Someone had prepared for them. Someone had thought about what a mother with 2 small children would need, and had made sure it was there. Consuelo handles most of the domestic things around here. Dolores explained, noticing Elaine's reaction. She's been where you are. 20 years ago, she showed up with nothing but the clothes on her back. Now she mothers everyone who comes through these doors. After Dolores left, Elaine locked the door behind her. Then she checked the windows, making sure each one was secured. Then she checked the door again. Old habits. That evening, there was a knock at the door. Elaine's heart seized, and she was on her feet instantly, positioning herself between the door and the children. It's Marcus, a voice called from outside. Just checking in. Mind if I come in? Elaine hesitated, then opened the door a crack. Marcus stood on the small porch, hands visible at his sides, making no move to enter. I wanted to let you know we looked at your car, he said. Towed it back here this afternoon while you were resting. Elaine's stomach dropped. Is it bad? Marcus's expression told her everything before he spoke. The engine is damaged beyond what we can repair here. But that's not what concerns me. He held out his phone, showing her a photograph. It took Elaine a moment to understand what she was looking at. That's your fuel line, Marcus explained. See that cut? It's not from wear and tear. Someone sliced it. Not all the way through, just enough that it would fail after 50 or 60 miles of driving. The world tilted. Elaine gripped the doorframe to keep from falling. And this, Marcus continued, showing her another photo, was hidden under your rear bumper. GPS tracker. Small, expensive, the kind professionals use. Preston. Of course it was Preston? Your husband, Marcus asked quietly. Elaine nodded, unable to speak. He sabotaged your car so it would break down on the road. And he was tracking you, knew exactly where you were, until the car died. Marcus put his phone away. But when the car stopped moving, you didn't call anyone. You walked. You broke his plan. Elaine had not thought of it that way. She had simply been trying to survive. He'll find us, she whispered. He always finds what he wants. Maybe. But now you're not alone. Marcus's voice was steady. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps. But tonight you're safe. I promise you that. After he left, Elaine checked the locks again. Twice. The children were already asleep, exhausted from the day's journey. She watched them for a long time, Rosie curled around Mr. Flopsy, Caleb sprawled on his back, with one arm flung out. They looked peaceful. They looked safe. Elaine wondered how long that would last. She tried to sleep but couldn't. Every creak of the cottage settling made her flinch. Every distant sound made her heart race. Around midnight, she got up and checked the locks again, then stood at the window watching the moonlit courtyard. She could see shadows moving along the fence line. Guards. People keeping watch. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Preston had connections everywhere. He had money, power, resources she couldn't begin to match. Sooner or later, he would find them, and when he did, these good people would be in danger because of her. The thought crystallized into certainty. She had to leave. Tonight, before Preston traced her here, before she brought destruction down on the haven and everyone in it. Moving quietly so as not to wake the children, Elaine began gathering their few belongings, the clothes they had arrived in, the small bag she had brought from Colorado, Rosie's Mr. Flopsy, which she would have to pry from her daughter's sleeping arms. She was shoving items into the bag when a soft knock came at the door. Elaine froze. "It's Dolores. I saw movement through your window. Everything okay?" For a moment, Elaine considered not answering, considered climbing out the back window with the children and disappearing into the desert night. But something made her open the door instead. Dolores stood there in jeans and a flannel shirt, her expression knowing. Her eyes went to the bag in Elaine's hand. "Going somewhere?" "I can't stay here." The words tumbled out. "If Preston finds me, he'll hurt everyone. I can't let that happen. You've all been so kind, and I can't repay that by bringing danger to your doorstep." Dolores didn't argue. She just stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and walked to the kitchen. "Sit down. Elaine, you don't understand. He's dangerous. He has people everywhere. He'll..." "Sit down." Something in Dolores's voice, calm but commanding, made Elaine obey. She sank into a kitchen chair while Dolores put on a kettle. "15 years ago," Dolores said, her back to Elaine as she prepared tea, "I was exactly where you are right now, standing in a room with a bag packed, ready to run in the middle of the night." She turned around, leaning against the counter. "My husband was a police officer, decorated, respected, the kind of man everyone trusted." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "He was also the man who broke my ribs twice, dislocated my shoulder, and once held my head underwater in the bathtub until I passed out." Elaine stared at her. No one believed me. How could they? He was a cop. He was supposed to protect people. Who would believe that he went home every night and beat his wife? Dolores laughed bitterly. "I tried to report him 3 times. Each time the report disappeared. His buddies on the force made sure of that." "How did you get out?" "I ran, just like you. I took nothing but the clothes on my back and drove until I couldn't drive anymore. Ended up in a parking lot somewhere in Arizona, sleeping in my car, trying to figure out how to survive." The kettle began to whistle. Dolores poured hot water over tea bags and brought 2 mugs to the table. "Marcus found me. He was doing outreach for the haven, looking for people who needed help. He didn't ask questions. He just offered me a safe place to stay." She sat down across from Elaine. "I almost didn't take it. I almost ran again. Because running alone was all I knew." "What changed your mind?" "Marcus said something I've never forgotten. He said, 'Running alone is what they want. When you're isolated, they have all the power. But standing with a community, with people who will fight for you, that's how you take the power back.'" Elaine wrapped her hands around the warm mug, feeling the heat seep into her cold fingers. "What if I bring danger here?" she asked. "What if Preston comes and someone gets hurt because of me? That's our choice to make, not yours." Dolores's voice was firm. "Every person in this compound knows the risks. We've all faced violence before. Most of us have scars to prove it." She touched the tattoo on her forearm, and Elaine saw now that it covered an older scar, one that looked like it had come from a knife. We don't take people in because it's easy. We take them in because it's right. I don't know how to stop running. You don't have to stop all at once. You just have to stop tonight. Dolores reached across the table and took Elaine's hand. Stay. Let us help you. Let us stand with you when Preston comes, because he will come. And when he does, he's going to find something he's never encountered before. What's that? A family that fights back. The word hung in the air. Family. It had meant pain for so long, obligation, chains. But looking at Dolores, at this woman who had survived her own hell and emerged strong enough to help others, Elaine felt something shift inside her. Okay, she said quietly. I'll stay. Dolores nodded, as if she had expected nothing less. Good. Now finish your tea and get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. After Dolores left, Elaine unpacked the bag she had filled. She put the clothes back, set Mr. Flopsy on Rosie's pillow, and checked on both children one more time. Then she went to bed, and, for the first time since leaving Colorado, slept without nightmares. She woke to sunlight streaming through clean windows and the sound of her children laughing. Elaine stumbled out of bed, heart pounding from instinct, and found them in the living room playing with a wooden truck that definitely had not been there the night before. Someone had left it during the night. A small gift for children who had nothing. A knock at the door made her tense, but Rosie was already running toward it. Mama, someone's here! Elaine checked the window first and saw a stout woman in her 60s standing on the porch, arms laden with grocery bags. She opened the door cautiously. Buenos dias, the woman said, beaming. I'm Consuelo. I brought breakfast, and I'm not leaving until everyone eats. Before Elaine could respond, Consuelo had bustled past her into the kitchen, setting down bags and immediately beginning to unpack. I have fresh bread, eggs, fruit, milk for the little ones, and my famous cinnamon rolls because everyone deserves something sweet. She turned to look at Elaine with knowing eyes. Sit. Eat. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in months. Elaine sat, overwhelmed by this force of nature in a flour, dusted apron. As Consuelo cooked, she talked. About the community, about the members, about the rules. No drugs, no fighting. Everyone contributes what they can. She talked about her own history, about the husband who had nearly killed her, about the years she spent rebuilding her life. Keanu and Marcus built this place, Consuelo said, cracking eggs into a pan. But we're the ones who make it a home. Every person who comes through here adds something to the family. I don't have anything to add, Elaine said quietly. I came here with nothing. You have yourself. You have your children. You have a story that will help someone else someday understand they're not alone. Consuelo fixed her with a sharp look. That's not nothing. That's everything. After breakfast, Elaine ventured outside for the first time. The children ran ahead toward the playground, and she let them go, watching from a distance as they introduced themselves to the other kids. The compound was busier during the day. People moved between buildings, tending the garden, working in the garage, sitting in small groups talking. They nodded at Elaine as she passed, friendly but not intrusive, giving her space. She found Keanu in the garage, working on a motorcycle. His hands were covered in grease, and he was completely absorbed in the task. Morning? He said, looking up. Sleep okay? Better than I have in years, actually. He smiled at that. Good. That's the first step. Elaine leaned against the doorframe. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why do you do this? You could be anywhere in the world. You could be living in a mansion, not getting your hands dirty in a garage in the middle of nowhere. Keanu was quiet for a moment, his hands still moving on the engine, but his eyes distant. In 1999, he said finally, my girlfriend was pregnant. We were going to have a daughter. We had already picked out a name. Ava, he paused. She was stillborn, 8.5 months. We were so close to meeting her, and then she was gone. Elaine's heart clenched. 18 months later, Jennifer died in a car accident. I lost them both in less than 2 years. Keanu set down his wrench. There were years when I didn't know why I was still here. I went through the motions. But inside, I was empty. What changed? I realized that the pain wasn't going to go away. But I had a choice about what to do with it. He met her eyes. I could let it destroy me, or I could turn it into something that helps other people. That's what the Haven is. It's me trying to take the worst thing that ever happened to me and make something good come from it. Elaine thought about her own pain, the 6 years of hell she had endured. I don't know how to trust people anymore, she admitted. Preston destroyed that in me. You don't have to trust anyone right away. Trust is earned. Keanu wiped his hands on a rag. But everyone here has been where you are. We understand what it feels like to be broken. And we're still standing. That means you can stand too. Before Elaine could respond, Marcus appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt. We need to talk. His expression was serious. I found something you need to see. They gathered in Marcus's office in the main building. Keanu, Dolores, and Elaine sat around a worn wooden table while Marcus pulled up images on a laptop. I did some digging on Preston Holloway, Marcus said. Used some contacts from my military days. He turned the laptop toward Elaine. On the screen was a photo of a woman, perhaps 30, with red, brown hair and a cautious smile. Do you recognize her? Elaine shook her head. Her name is Margaret Kinsley. She was Preston Holloway's first wife. Elaine's blood went cold. He was married before, for 3 years. And then, 8 years ago, she disappeared. Marcus clicked to another image, a missing persons report. No body was ever found. Police classified it as a voluntary disappearance. What does that mean? It means no one looked too hard because Preston had connections. Marcus's voice was grim, but I talked to Margot's brother. He never believed she ran away. He thinks Preston made her disappear. The room was silent. There's a pattern, Marcus continued. Preston marries women without strong family support. He isolates them. He controls them. And when they try to leave, he makes sure they can't. Elaine thought about the fuel line, the GPS tracker, Preston's promise to make her disappear if she ever tried to leave. He was going to kill me, she said. It wasn't a question. I think so. But you got out. You broke his pattern. Marcus closed the laptop. Now we're going to make sure he can't hurt you or anyone else ever again. How? By building a case. By documenting everything. Marcus leaned forward. But I need to know, Elaine. Are you willing to fight? Because this is going to get ugly. Elaine thought about Rosie and Caleb playing outside. About the bruise that had finally faded from Caleb's face. About all the nights she had lain awake wondering if she would live to see morning. Yes, she said. I'm willing to fight. That evening, Elaine stood on the porch of her cottage, watching the sun set over the desert. The sky was painted in shades of orange and gold. The children were inside, already asleep. Keanu found her there with 2 cups of coffee. Thought you could use this, he said. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the colors shift. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Elaine admitted. For someone to tell me this isn't real. That's normal. It takes time to believe good things can happen without a price. How long did it take you? I'll let you know when I figure it out. He smiled slightly. But I've learned you don't have to believe it to accept it. Just take it one day at a time. What happens now? Now we prepare. Marcus is reaching out to lawyers. We're documenting everything. We're building a wall between you and Preston. And if he tries to break through. Keanu turned to look at her, and his eyes held something fierce. Then he'll find out what happens when he picks a fight with people who don't back down. Inside the cottage, Rosie cried out in her sleep. Elaine was moving before she consciously decided to, the instinct to protect her children overriding everything else. When she reached the bedroom, Rosie was already settling. Mr. Flopsy clutched tight, Caleb's small hand reaching out to rest on his sister's arm. They were safe. For now. And tomorrow, Elaine would begin the fight to make sure they stayed that way. 3 days after Elaine arrived at the Haven, Keanu organized a meeting that would change everything. He had made phone calls, called in favors, and assembled a team of people who knew how to fight battles in courtrooms rather than on battlefields. They gathered in the main building's conference room, a space that had once been a dining hall but now served multiple purposes. The walls were lined with photographs of people who had passed through the Haven over the years, smiling faces of those who had rebuilt their lives after hitting rock bottom. Elaine sat at the long wooden table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across from her sat 3 women who radiated competence and determination. Miranda Chen was the first to introduce herself. She was in her late 40s, sharp, featured with streaks of premature gray in her black hair that she wore like badges of honor. Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct. "I specialize in family law," she said. "Custody cases, divorce proceedings, protection orders. I've been doing this for 22 years, and I've helped over 70 women in situations similar to yours." Next was Simone Barrett, younger, perhaps 35, with kind eyes that had seen too much. "I focus specifically on domestic violence cases. I work with shelters, law enforcement, and the court system to make sure survivors have every legal protection available to them." The third woman was older, perhaps 60, with silver hair and a face that seemed carved from granite. "Kathleen Morrison," she said. "Retired federal prosecutor. I handle cases that cross state lines, which yours does. When Preston sabotaged your car in Colorado and it failed in New Mexico, he committed a federal crime." Elaine looked at the 3 women, feeling simultaneously overwhelmed and, for the first time, genuinely hopeful. "Here's what we're going to do," Miranda said, opening a leather folder. "First, we file for an emergency protection order. New Mexico has strong domestic violence laws. If we can demonstrate that Preston poses a credible threat, we can get an order that prevents him from coming within 1,000 feet of you or the children. He violated the last restraining order I tried to get," Elaine said quietly. "Back in Colorado, his friend made it disappear. This isn't Colorado." Miranda's smile was sharp. "And Judge Eleanor Whitfield, who will likely hear your case, is a former prosecutor who specialized in domestic violence. She doesn't tolerate abusers or the people who protect them." Simone continued, "Second, we're filing for emergency custody. Right now, legally, Preston has equal parental rights. We need to change that immediately. We'll argue that he's a danger to the children based on the documented abuse, the threats, and the sabotage of your vehicle." "Can we prove the sabotage?" Elaine asked. "Marcus documented everything with photos and a written statement. He's a licensed mechanic and a former military medic. His testimony will carry significant weight." Simone pulled out a folder. "Combined with the GPS tracker, we have clear evidence of stalking with intent to harm." Kathleen leaned forward. "Third, we're getting you divorced. Fast. Arizona and New Mexico both allow expedited proceedings in cases involving domestic violence. We can have you legally separated from Preston within 60 days. 60 days. The number seemed impossibly small after 6 years of imprisonment. "But Elaine," Miranda said, her voice softening, "you need to understand something. This is going to get ugly. Preston is going to fight back. He's going to hire expensive lawyers. He's going to try to paint you as an unfit mother, as mentally unstable, as a kidnapper. He's going to drag every mistake you've ever made into public record." Elaine's stomach clenched. "I know. Can you handle that?" She thought about Rosie and Caleb playing outside, their laughter drifting through the window. She thought about the bruise that had finally faded from Caleb's face, about the nightmares that still woke Rosie in the middle of the night. "I don't have a choice," she said. "I have to try." "That's the right answer." Miranda stood. "We're filing the paperwork today. Simone and Kathleen will work on the federal angle while I handle the state court. In the meantime, you need to sit down with Marcus and document everything. Every incident, every threat, every injury. dates, times, witnesses if there were any. After the lawyers left to drive to the courthouse in Albuquerque, Elaine spent 3 hours with Marcus, going through every scar on her body, every memory she had tried to bury. He photographed the faded marks on her arms, the crooked finger that had healed wrong after Preston broke it, the small bald spot where hair had never grown back after he had ripped it out during a fight 2 years ago. "You're doing great," Marcus said quietly as he worked. "I know this is hard. I feel like I'm betraying him," Elaine admitted, then immediately felt foolish. "I know that's crazy. I know he deserves this. But I spent 6 years protecting him, making excuses for him, hiding what he did. That's trauma bonding," Marcus said, setting down his camera. "It's a survival mechanism. Your brain learned that protecting Preston kept you safe. Now you have to retrain it to understand that protecting yourself is what keeps you safe. How long does that take? Different for everyone. But you're already doing it. You left. You asked for help. You're building a case against him." He met her eyes. "Those are huge steps, Elaine. Don't minimize them." That afternoon, a car appeared at the compound's gate. Dutch radioed from his security post, and Marcus went to investigate. When he returned, his expression was unreadable. "Lane, you have visitors." Her heart stopped. "Preston?" "No, your father and your sister." Elaine felt the blood drain from her face. Bernard Hayes stood in the courtyard, looking older and grayer than she remembered. He was 63 now, his military bearing still evident in the straight line of his spine, but his eyes were red, rimmed, and his hands trembled as he clutched a baseball cap. Beside him stood Noelle, Elaine's younger sister. She was 25 now, with the same brown hair and green eyes as Elaine, but where Elaine had been worn down by years of abuse, Noelle still held a spark of fire in her gaze. "Elaine?" Bernard breathed when he saw her. Thank God you're alive." Elaine stood frozen, unable to move toward him or away. This was the man who had disowned her when she chose to marry Preston against his advice. The man who had said she had made her choice and would have to live with the consequences. The man who had not spoken to her in 6 years. "How did you find me?" she asked, her voice cold. "Noel." Bernard's voice cracked. "She's been trying to find you for years. When she heard you had finally left, she tracked you through channels I don't fully understand. And she called me." Noel stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Ellie, I never stopped looking. I never stopped hoping you would get out." Something cracked in Elaine's chest. "You called me? I remember. Preston said you were trying to ruin our marriage. He intercepted the calls. He blocked my number. He returned my letters unopened." Noel's voice shook with barely contained rage. "I tried everything, Ellie. The police, social services, everything. But he had connections everywhere. No one would help. So why now?" Elaine looked at her father. Why show up now, after 6 years of silence? Bernard Hayes met her eyes, and she saw something she had never seen there before. Shame. "Because I was wrong," he said simply. "I was proud and stubborn, and I thought I was teaching you a lesson by letting you face the consequences of your choice. I thought you would come crawling back, admit I was right, and then I would forgive you." His voice broke. "I didn't know Elaine. I swear to God, I didn't know what he was doing to you. And when Noel called me and told me about the broken bones, the bruises, what he did to Caleb." He couldn't finish. Tears streamed down his weathered face. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he continued. "I don't deserve it, but I'm here now. I'm a retired Air Force colonel, 30 years of service. I have connections in the military and with federal agencies, including contacts at the FBI who owe me favors. If you'll let me, I want to help destroy the man who hurt my daughter." Elaine wanted to scream at him. Wanted to tell him that his help was 6 years too late. Wanted to make him feel even a fraction of the pain she had felt when he abandoned her. But she was tired of carrying anger, and she needed every ally she could get. "Fine," she said. "You can help, But you don't get to see the children until I'm ready. You don't get to make decisions. You provide resources and support, and that's it. Bernard nodded, relief flooding his face. Whatever you need. Whatever it takes. Noel stepped closer, holding out a USB drive. Ellie, I have something. 6 years of something. Elaine took the drive, confused. What is this? Every time you called me crying, I recorded it. Every text message you sent, I saved. Every time I visited and saw bruises on your arms, I took photos when you weren't looking. Noel's voice was fierce. I have 47 recordings, 83 text messages, and 26 photographs. I have everything, Ellie. I've been building a case against Preston for 6 years, waiting for the day you would be ready to use it. Elaine stared at the USB drive in her hand, this small piece of plastic that contained 6 years of documented abuse. Why didn't you tell me? Because you weren't ready. And if Preston had found out, he would have destroyed it. And you. Noel took her hand. But you're ready now. And together, we're going to make him pay for every single thing he did to you. That evening, the lawyers returned with good news. Judge Whitfield had reviewed the emergency petition and approved a temporary protection order, effective immediately. Preston Holloway was now legally barred from coming within 1,000 feet of Elaine, Rosie, or Caleb. Violation meant immediate arrest. How do we enforce it? Elaine asked. How does he even know it exists? Sheriff's Department is serving him today, Miranda explained. We tracked him to a motel outside Albuquerque. Deputies are on their way there now. Elaine's blood chilled. He's that close. He was. But after being served, if he comes anywhere near this compound or you, he goes straight to jail. No questions. No negotiations. What about custody? Emergency custody hearing is scheduled for 5 days from now. Judge Whitfield is expediting it. Simone pulled out another file. We have Marcus's documentation, photos of the sabotaged car, your sister's evidence, and your father's testimony, plus the information about Margot Kinsley, the first wife. Elaine murmured. Miranda contacted her family. Her brother has agreed to testify about the threats Preston made before she disappeared. Simone's expression was serious. Elaine, this is bigger than a custody case now. This is potentially a criminal investigation. The FBI is involved because of the vehicle sabotage crossing state lines. Your father's contacts have been helpful in expediting that process. They're building a case, but it takes time. I don't have time. The custody hearing is in 5 days, and we'll be ready. Miranda's voice was firm. Preston isn't going to charm his way out of this one. But Preston Holloway was not a man who accepted defeat. Over the next 2 days, he launched his counterattack. He hired a private investigator who was seen photographing the Havens perimeter. He used his media connections to plant stories in Colorado newspapers about the unstable mother who kidnapped her children. He filed a counter petition claiming Elaine was mentally ill and that he was the victim of parental alienation. His playing his usual game, Miranda told Elaine during a strategy meeting. Abusers do this all the time. They flip the narrative, make themselves the victim, and hope you'll panic and make a mistake. What do I do? Nothing. That's your strength. You stay here, protected, with lawyers, with evidence. He's the one who has to chase you, not the other way around. But on the third night, the situation escalated. At 2 in the morning, the compound's alarm system went off. Elaine grabbed the children and ran to the safe room in the main building, a reinforced space with thick walls and security monitors. Dolores and Consuelo were already there with 2 other women who were staying at the Haven. Through the security cameras, Elaine watched flashlight beams sweeping across the property. Dutch and Greta were moving toward the north fence, where motion sensors had detected an intruder. It's probably nothing, Consuelo said, but her hands were shaking. 20 minutes later, Marcus's voice came through the intercom. All clear. We got him. They had caught a man in his early 30s trying to cut through the fence. He was carrying rope and duct tape. When Dutch and Greta confronted him, he had surrendered immediately. He talked fast once we got him inside. Marcus explained to Elaine an hour later. Said he was hired to scare you. Just scare you, he claims. Make you frightened enough that you'd call Preston and beg to come home. Who hired him? Preston Holloway. Paid him $5,000. Marcus's jaw tightened. The sheriff has him in custody now. He's agreed to testify about who hired him and why. Elaine felt sick. Preston had sent someone to terrorize her in the middle of the night, someone with rope and duct tape, and he claimed it was just to scare her. This is good for us, legally, Miranda said the next morning. We now have direct evidence of stalking and harassment. The man he hired is willing to testify. Preston just handed us another nail for his coffin. But Elaine couldn't feel relieved. Preston was getting desperate, and desperate men were dangerous. After the attempted intrusion, Keanu called a meeting with the full community. We've been playing defense, he said. And when you play defense, the attacker always has the advantage. It's time to change that? What do you mean? Elaine asked. I've been thinking about this since you told me your story. Preston operates in the shadows. He uses money and connections to silence people, to make problems disappear. But there's one thing he can't control. What? Public attention. Keanu leaned forward. Elaine, I have contacts in journalism. People I trust, who do investigative reporting on domestic violence, on how wealthy abusers use the system to trap their victims. If we tell your story, not for publicity, but to shine a light on how men like Preston operate, we take away his greatest weapon. Elaine felt her stomach clench. The thought of her story being public, of everyone knowing what she had endured, what she had allowed to happen to her children. I know it's terrifying, Keanu continued, sensing her hesitation. But this isn't just about you anymore. There are thousands of women trapped in situations just like yours. Women who think no one will believe them, that their abusers are too powerful to fight. You could show them that's not true. Miranda nodded. From a legal standpoint, media attention can actually help. It makes it harder for Preston to manipulate the narrative. It puts pressure on the court system to take the case seriously. And it creates a public record that can't be erased. Elaine looked around the room at the faces watching her. Dolores, who had survived her own nightmare. Marcus, who had dedicated his life to helping others. Keanu, who had turned his grief into purpose. Her father, desperate to make amends. Her sister, who had never stopped fighting for her. Okay, she said quietly. Let's do it. The night before the custody hearing, Elaine couldn't sleep. She sat beside the children's bed, watching them breathe, memorizing their faces. Keanu found her there at 3 in the morning. You should rest, he said softly. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. Keanu sat down in the chair beside her. You know what helped me during the worst times? What? Remembering that the man in my nightmares wasn't actually there. He was miles away, probably planning his next move. But I was here, safe, with people who wouldn't let him touch me. His voice was low, soothing. The fear is real, but the threat isn't immediate. You have time to breathe. I don't know how to breathe without fear anymore. Then we'll teach you. Dolores does yoga every morning. Greta teaches self-defense at noon. I've got a punching bag in the garage if you need to hit something. He smiled slightly. We've all been where you are. We know how to survive it. What if I can't? What if I'm not strong enough? You walked 8 miles through the desert, carrying your children to keep them safe. You asked a complete stranger for help when pride would have been easier. You left everything you knew to protect your kids. Keanu met her eyes. Lane, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You just don't know it yet. His words settled over her like a blanket, not removing the fear, but making it bearable. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, Miranda brings the final documents. Then we go to court. He paused at the doorway. And Elaine, remember something. That courtroom tomorrow, you're not walking in alone. You have a whole community behind you. Preston is going to look across that room and see something he's never faced before. What's that? A woman who refused to stay broken, and an army of people who believe in her. After Keanu left, Elaine checked on the children one more time. Rosie was curled around Mr. Flopsy. Caleb had kicked off his blanket, and she gently covered him again. Tomorrow would decide their future. Tomorrow she would face the man who had terrorized her for 6 years. Tomorrow everything could change. But tonight, her children were safe. They were loved. And for the first time, Elaine allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were going to win. Outside in the darkness beyond the compound fence, Preston Holloway sat in a rented car, watching the lights in the guest cottage. He had been served with the protection order. He knew the consequences of violating it. But Preston had never been good at accepting boundaries. He started the engine and drove away, already planning his next move. The custody hearing was in 12 hours, and Preston Holloway intended to remind his wife exactly who was in control. The game was far from over. 8 months had passed since the day Preston Holloway was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. 8 months since Elaine Thornton had walked out of that Denver courtroom knowing, truly knowing, that she was finally free. So much had changed in those 8 months that sometimes Elaine had to remind herself it was all real. She stood at the window of her apartment in Santa Fe, watching the morning sun paint the adobe buildings in shades of gold and rose. It was a small place, just 2 bedrooms, a modest kitchen, and a living room that caught the afternoon light. Nothing fancy. Nothing like the mansion she had lived in with Preston, with its cold marble floors and empty rooms that echoed with her loneliness. But this apartment was hers. She paid the rent with money she earned herself, from a job she had gotten on her own merits. And every morning when she woke up here, she felt something Preston had stolen from her years ago. Pride. "Mama!" "Caleb took my crayon." Elaine turned from the window to see Rosie storming into the living room, her face red with 4-year-old indignation. Behind her, Caleb followed at a more leisurely pace, a purple crayon clutched triumphantly in his fist. "It's not yours," Caleb said calmly. "It's the purple one. You said you don't like purple anymore." "I changed my mind!" Elaine knelt down between them, gently taking the crayon from Caleb's hand. "How about we share? Rosie can use it first, and then Caleb gets a turn. Fair." Both children considered this with the gravity of diplomats negotiating a treaty. Finally, they nodded. "Okay, Mama," Rosie said, taking the crayon. She hugged Elaine around the neck. "You're the best at fixing things." After they had returned to their coloring books, Elaine allowed herself a small smile. Such ordinary problems. Crayon disputes and sibling rivalry. The kind of trivial conflicts that filled normal childhoods. For so long, her children's lives had been defined by fear, walking on eggshells around their father, flinching at loud noises, waking up screaming from nightmares they couldn't explain. Now they were just kids, squabbling over crayons, learning their letters at the kindergarten they attended 3 blocks away, making friends and skinning their knees and slowly healing from wounds they were too young to fully understand. They still saw a child psychologist twice a week, a kind woman named Dr. Reyes who specialized in helping children process trauma. The progress was gradual but real. Caleb had started talking more, his words coming easier now that he didn't have to guard them. Rosie had stopped waking up in the middle of the night, though she still slept with Mr. Flopsy clutched tight against her chest. They were going to be okay. Elaine believed that now, in a way, she hadn't been able to 8 months ago. At 8:30, she dropped the children off at Little Star's kindergarten, watching them run toward the playground where their friends were waiting. Rosie turned back to wave, her gap-toothed smile bright in the morning sun. "Bye, Mama! See you after work." "Bye, baby. Have a good day." Work. Another word that had taken on new meaning. Elaine drove to the small accounting firm where she had been employed for the past 6 months. It wasn't glamorous work, processing tax returns and reconciling balance sheets, but she was good at it. She had always been good with numbers, back before Preston had convinced her that she was too stupid to work, that she needed him to take care of her. Her boss, a practical woman named Patricia, had hired her based on a recommendation from Miranda Chen. Patricia knew Elaine's story, knew about the years of abuse and the court case that had made national news. She didn't treat Elaine like a victim or a curiosity. She treated her like an employee who showed up on time, did her work well, and could be trusted with responsibility. It was exactly what Elaine needed. The days had a rhythm now. Work during the week, evenings with the children, therapy on Tuesdays, where she was slowly learning to untangle the knots that Preston had tied in her mind, and Saturdays at the Haven. Elaine drove the familiar road through the desert every Saturday morning, the landscape that had once seemed so alien now feeling like home. The Haven had grown in the 8 months since she had first arrived there, desperate and starving and certain that no one could help her. The original 10 acres had expanded to 30. Where there had once been a dozen small houses, there were now almost 40. The vegetable garden had tripled in size. A new building had gone up, a community center with a proper kitchen, a meeting hall, and offices for the counselors and case workers who helped residents navigate their way back to independence. Keanu's story about Elaine had done what he said it would. When the investigative journalist he trusted published the piece about Preston Holloway and the system that had protected him for so long, it had sparked something. Donations had poured in from across the country. Volunteers had appeared, offering their time and expertise. Other survivors had reached out, drawn by the knowledge that there was a place where they would be believed. The Haven had become something larger than any of them had imagined. A beacon for people lost in the darkness of abuse. A community built on the radical idea that everyone deserved safety, dignity, and a second chance. Elaine parked her car and walked toward the main building, breathing in the familiar scent of sage and desert air. She found Marcus in his office, surrounded by paperwork, looking exactly as overwhelmed as he always did these days. "Morning," she said, setting a cup of coffee on his desk. "Patricia sends her regards, and her accountant's opinion that you need to hire more administrative staff." Marcus laughed, rubbing his tired eyes. "Patricia's accountant isn't wrong. We've got 3 new families arriving this week, and I'm still trying to figure out where to put them all. The expansion cottages should be ready by Thursday. If the contractor doesn't flake on us again." He took a sip of coffee and sighed with relief. "How are you doing? Really?" It was a question he asked every week, and every week Elaine gave him the same honest answer. Better. A little bit better every day. That morning, Elaine led a support group for newly arrived women, something she had started doing 3 months ago. It had been Dolores's idea. "You've been where they are?" Dolores had said. "You know what it feels like to be that scared, that hopeless. Sometimes hearing from someone who made it through is more powerful than anything a counselor can say." So every Saturday, Elaine sat in a circle with women who were just beginning their journey out of abuse. She listened to their stories. She answered their questions. She shared her own experience, not as a lesson or a lecture, but simply as proof that survival was possible. Today there were 5 women in the group. A mother of 3 from Texas whose husband had put her in the hospital twice. A young woman barely 20 who had fled an arranged marriage. A grandmother who had finally left after 40 years of violence, pushed to action when her husband started hitting their grandchildren. Each story was different. Each story was the same. "I keep thinking I should go back," the young woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He wasn't always bad. Sometimes he was so sweet. Maybe if I tried harder." Elaine recognized the script. She had recited it herself for years. "Can I tell you something?" she said gently. I thought the same thing. Every time Preston hurt me, I found a way to blame myself. If I hadn't burned dinner, if I hadn't talked to that man at the party, if I had been prettier, smarter, better. She paused. It took me a long time to understand that it was never about what I did or didn't do. The abuse was his choice, his failure, not mine. The young woman's eyes filled with tears. But how do you stop believing it's your fault? One day at a time, one truth at a time, and with help from people who remind you of your worth when you can't see it yourself. Off. After the group session ended, Elaine walked through the compound, checking in on residents, answering questions, offering encouragement where it was needed. She had become something of a fixture here, a bridge between the frightened newcomers and the established community. She found Margot Kinsley in the garden, kneeling in the dirt, carefully transplanting seedlings into a new bed. Margot had stayed. After the trial, after her testimony had helped send Preston to prison, she had chosen to remain at the Haven rather than return to her anonymous life in Canada. I spent 8 years hiding, she had told Elaine, running from my past, pretending to be someone else. I'm done running. I want to help other women so they don't have to disappear like I did. Now Margot worked as a peer counselor, drawing on her own experience to help women who were just beginning to understand the depth of the trap they had escaped. She and Elaine had become close, bound by the unique understanding that came from having survived the same monster. The tomatoes are coming in beautifully, Elaine said, crouching down beside her. Margot smiled, brushing dirt from her hands. Dutch says we'll have enough to supply half of Santa Fe by August. She looked up at Elaine. How was the group today? Hard. Good. The usual. Elaine picked up a seedling and examined its tender leaves. There's a young woman, barely 20. She reminds me of myself at that age. So desperate to believe that love is supposed to hurt. Did you ever believe that? When you were with Preston? Elaine considered the question. I think I believed that I deserved the pain. That something was wrong with me, and Preston was trying to fix it. He was very good at making me feel like the problem was mine to solve. They always are. Margot's voice was distant. That's why it takes so long to see the truth. They convince you that the cage is a shelter. They worked in silence for a while, the sun warm on their backs, the rhythm of planting and watering soothing in its simplicity. That afternoon, a car pulled up to the compound's gate. Elaine recognized it immediately and felt her heart lift. Her father climbed out, moving a little slower than he used to, but still carrying himself with the military bearing that decades of service had instilled. Noelle emerged from the passenger side, her arms full of shopping bags. "Who brought supplies?" Noelle announced, kissing Elaine on the cheek. "And before you say anything, yes, I know you said not to bring gifts for the kids, but I found the cutest little backpacks and I couldn't resist." "You spoil them," Elaine said, but she was smiling. Bernard embraced his daughter, holding on perhaps a little longer than necessary. Their relationship was still healing, still tentative in places, but it was real in a way it hadn't been for years. After Elaine had won custody and Preston had been sentenced, Bernard had done something unexpected. He had sold his house in Colorado, the house where Elaine had grown up, and used part of the proceeds to establish something he called the Thornton Family Scholarship Fund. The fund provided educational support for children from families affected by domestic violence. College scholarships, tutoring programs, school supplies for kids whose families couldn't afford them. In its first 6 months, it had helped over 40 children continue their education despite the chaos that violence had brought to their lives. "It's the least I can do," Bernard had said when he told Elaine about it. "I can't undo the years I wasn't there for you, but maybe I can help some other kid have a chance I almost took from you." Elaine had cried when he told her. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that her father was finally trying to become the man she had always needed him to be. It didn't erase the past. Nothing could erase the past. But it was a start. That evening, Elaine received a phone call that made her heart swell with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "Mrs. Thornton, this is Dr. Sarah Martinez. I'm the principal at Eastview High School in Albuquerque." "Yes, Dr. Martinez. How can I help you?" "I wanted to let you know about something that happened today. Something I think you should hear." Elaine sat down, her pulse quickening. The Haven had partnered with several New Mexico schools to include information about domestic violence in their health education curriculum. Elaine's story, told anonymously, was part of that program, used to help students recognize the signs of abuse and understand that help was available. "One of our students, a sophomore named Maria, came to my office after the presentation today," Dr. Martinez continued. "She was crying. She told me that the story we shared, your story, made her realize that what was happening in her home wasn't normal." Elaine's breath caught. "Her father has been hitting her mother for years. Maria thought it was just how families were. She thought it was her job to stay quiet and protect the family secret." Dr. Martinez's voice was thick with emotion. "But after hearing your story, she understood that her mother deserved help. That asking for help wasn't betrayal, it was love." "What happened?" "Maria reported the abuse to us. We contacted the authorities. Her mother and siblings are now in a safe location, and her father is facing charges." Dr. Martinez paused. "I wanted you to know, Mrs. Thornton, that your willingness to share your experience may have saved that family's lives. Maria specifically asked me to thank the woman in the story. She said, 'Tell her she gave me courage.'" After the call ended, Elaine sat in the quiet of her apartment, tears streaming down her face. For so long, she had felt ashamed of what had happened to her. Ashamed that she had stayed, that she had endured, that she had not been strong enough to leave sooner. She had carried that shame like a stone around her neck, weighing her down even as she tried to move forward. But now, for the first time, she understood that her story had value beyond her own survival. Her pain, her struggle, her eventual triumph. These things could light the way for others still lost in the darkness. She was not just a survivor. She was a beacon. 1 week later, the Haven held its first annual celebration dinner. It had been exactly 1 year since Elaine had stumbled into that roadside diner, starving and desperate, and asked a stranger for his leftover food. The main building had been transformed for the occasion. Fairy lights hung from the rafters. Long tables were set with mismatched chairs and simple white tablecloths. The food was nothing fancy, potluck dishes brought by residents and volunteers, but it was abundant and made with love. Everyone was there. Marcus and Dolores, who had spent the past year running themselves ragged to keep up with the Haven's growth. Dutch and Greta, who had become unofficial grandparents to half the children in the compound. Consuelo, who had cooked enough food to feed an army and was still bustling around making sure everyone had seconds. Bernard sat with Noel at one of the long tables, looking more relaxed than Elaine had ever seen him. He had found purpose in his retirement, volunteering at the Haven 3 days a week, using his military connections to help veterans who had found their way here. Miranda Chen had come down from Albuquerque for the occasion. So had Simone Barrett and Kathleen Morrison, the legal team that had helped Elaine win her freedom. And of course, Keanu was there. He sat at the head of the main table, looking slightly uncomfortable with all the attention, as he always did. He had never wanted recognition for what he did. He just wanted to help. Elaine watched him from across the room, this man who had changed her life with a simple act of kindness. He had bought her a meal when she was starving. He had offered her shelter when she had nowhere to go. He had believed her when the world had taught her that no one would. He hadn't saved her. That wasn't quite right. She had saved herself, with her own strength, her own courage, her own determination to give her children a better life. But he had been there, at exactly the right moment, In exactly the right place, he had been there. And sometimes that was all it took. Rosie tugged at Elaine's sleeve, pulling her back to the present. Mama, can I ask you something? Elaine knelt down to her daughter's level. Of course, baby. What is it? Rosie looked around the room at all the people gathered there. At Marcus, who always had candy in his pockets for the children. At Dolores, who taught her how to do cartwheels. At Consuelo, who called her Mija and braided her hair. At her grandfather, who was learning to be a grandfather again. At Keanu, who always listened to her stories about Mr. Flopsy as if they were the most important things in the world. Is this our family now? Rosie asked. Elaine felt her heart crack open and fill with light. Yes, sweetheart, she said, pulling her daughter close. This is our family now. As the dinner wound down, Keanu stood to speak. The room fell quiet, everyone turning to listen. I'm not good at speeches. He began, and a ripple of laughter went through the crowd. But there's something I want to say tonight, and I hope you'll bear with me. He looked around the room, at the faces of people who had found their way here, from every corner of the country, from every kind of brokenness. A year ago, I met a woman in a diner who asked me for my leftover food. She was hungry, exhausted, afraid. She had walked 8 miles through the desert, carrying her 2 children, because she had no other choice. He found Elaine's eyes across the room. I didn't save her. She saved herself. I was just in the right place at the right time. Elaine felt tears spilling down her cheeks, but she didn't look away. That's the thing I want you all to understand. Keanu continued. You don't have to be special to make a difference. You don't have to be rich or famous or powerful. All you have to do is pay attention. Notice when someone is struggling. Ask if they need help. And then, this is the important part, really listen to the answer. He set down the glass he had been holding. Lane taught me something this year. She taught me that the people who seem the most broken are often the strongest of all. They've just been fighting alone for so long that they've forgotten there's another way. He smiled. So here's to not fighting alone anymore. Here's to this community, this family, and everyone who makes it possible. Here's to the people who stop and ask, what do you need? Here's to all of you. He raised an imaginary toast, and the room erupted in applause. Later that night, after the children were asleep in one of the Haven's guest cottages, Elaine stood outside looking at the stars. The desert sky was vast and clear, just as it had been on her first night here, when she had been too afraid to believe that safety was possible. Keanu found her there, as he so often did. How are you feeling? He asked. Elaine considered the question. A year ago, she would have answered with fear, with uncertainty, with the desperate hope that maybe things would get better. Now she could answer with something closer to truth. Grateful, she said, and scared, sometimes, and hopeful, all at once. That sounds about right. They stood in comfortable silence, 2 people who had found unexpected kinship in the broken places of the world. What happens now? Elaine asked. It was the same question she had asked him months ago, when everything was still uncertain. Now you keep going, Keanu said. You raise your kids. You do your work. You help the women who come after you. You build a life that's yours, not something someone else forced you into. And when the fear comes back, when I wake up in the middle of the night convinced that none of this is real. Keanu turned to look at her. Then you remember that you've already survived the worst thing that ever happened to you. You remember that you're not alone, and you get up the next morning and try again. Elaine nodded slowly. It wasn't a perfect answer. There were no perfect answers. But it was enough. She looked out at the haven, at the buildings that sheltered so many wounded souls, at the lights glowing warm in the windows, at this community that had wrapped itself around her when she had nothing left. You know what I've learned this year? She said quietly. What's that? That asking for help isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing a person can do. And that it's never too late to start over. No matter how broken you think you are, no matter how many times you've failed, there's always a chance to begin again. Keanu smiled. That sounds like wisdom to me. It took me 6 years to learn it. I hope it doesn't take others as long. That's why you tell your story. That's why you sit with those women every Saturday. You're showing them that the path exists, even when they can't see it. Elaine thought about Maria, the high school student who had found the courage to report her father. About the women in her support group, taking their first tentative steps toward freedom. About Rosie and Caleb, who would grow up knowing that love wasn't supposed to hurt. The world needs more people who stop and ask, she said. People who see someone struggling and don't just walk by. People who offer help without expecting anything in return. Be that person, Keanu said simply. That's all any of us can do. Be the person you needed when you were at your lowest. Elaine nodded. She had been that person for Maria without even knowing it. She could be that person for others too. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent, but somehow comforting in their constancy. Somewhere in the compound, a child laughed in their sleep. Somewhere else, a woman who had arrived just yesterday was learning that she was safe, that she was believed, that she mattered. Elaine Thornton had walked through fire and emerged on the other side. She had lost nearly everything, and in the losing had found something she never expected. A family, a purpose, a future, and the knowledge, hard-won and precious, that no one has to face the darkness alone. Because sometimes all it takes is one person. One moment of kindness, one hand extended in the dark, and that one moment can change everything. This is a fictional story created from imagination and inspired by the public image of Keanu Reeves. It is not based on any real events. The story is intended for entertainment purposes, while also sharing meaningful lessons and messages for viewers to reflect on and take away.